While it's only been 2 games, it certainly looks like the New York Mets are getting hot at the right time.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. Want to find some of my written work? You can do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, we were wondering, how would the New York Mets respond after that dramatic walk-off victory on Sunday as Pete Alonso delivered that opposite field homer? Could that be a turning point? Because that is always what you're looking for in a baseball season. It's the big moments. It's the huge games that can spark something. And this team looked as bad as possible for multiple weeks, but you weren't that far removed from sweeping the Phillies, playing up to the best competition that's out there. We've heard it ad nauseum how talented this 2025 Mets team is. But when are we going to see them play at their best? And can it come when it matters most? Can they get hot and roll into the playoffs? On yesterday's show, I said, what would it take for you to believe? And one of the things I talked about was how important it would be for the Mets to blitz Michael King, have a huge first inning, and carry over that momentum to see this team find some answers in their rotation. And what did we get in this game? We saw the big first inning, and we saw the piggyback work to perfection with Clay Holmes and Manaea. And now the Mets have won 2 games in a row. Some other teams are losing, as we'll talk about in the next segment when it comes to this wild card race. And the Mets are even more in the driver's seat as they continue here with 11 games left and 5 more in this homestand to really build up this momentum. It was a huge victory, and it was a game that we watched on Tuesday where the Mets played freer and easier and looser and however else you want to describe it, whatever adjective you want to throw on it. They looked like a team that was not weighed down by all of the losses, by the maybe failed expectations of being able to win this division, about how this team has just for not just weeks, but really months struggled to find their footing. And then I think that those losses compound on you. This was a team that came out ready to play. Clay Holmes had a good first inning, 1, 2, 3, and then you see the Mets go to work on Michael King. Now, Michael King was not great in this game. He said after fastball command wasn't there. And yes, he was giving the Mets pitches to hit. And sometimes there's that luck side of it too, right? They have gone up against some really tough pitchers over the last few weeks. You think about the Hunter Green start. You think about some of the Phillies starters, what you saw from Jesus Luzardo after his blow up early inning and the way he was able to lock back in, the way that Ranger Suarez and Christopher Sanchez pitched. You can go on and on. A lot of really dominant pitching performances were part of the Mets struggles. And so getting the benefit of Michael King not being on, that's a huge, huge confidence boost because the Mets took advantage this time. Because there was also some of those games mixed in where it wasn't the most dominant pitching performance. It's not like Patrick Corbin was out there, pitching a gem and just dotting his spots and he was unhittable. It's that the Mets were playing tight. And so it's a combination of things, but in that first inning, it was base hit, base hit, base hit. And the energy at Citi Field is building and building and building. And then all the energy is sucked out of the room for a moment as Mark Vientos hits into a 1-2-3 double play. I was so close to nailing a prediction when it came to that big first inning ambush because I talked about how Mark Vientos was going to hit a 3-run homer to make it a 4-run inning. And at the time, the Mets had one across, bases loaded. Grand slam would have looked pretty good. But instead, Vientos hits into that double play, and Michael King could have gotten out of it. But the biggest at-bat of the game goes to Jeff McNeil. Because with the pressure of 2 outs and the Mets running the risk of only scoring one run when they opened up an inning with 4 consecutive hits. Nick Neal rips a double over the first base bag and scores a couple. So now the Mets have 3 runs. And then Brett Baty really makes Michael King pay, hits a bomb of a homer, and the Mets have a 5-0 lead. From there, they were able to cruise, especially because they got home runs from Francisco Lindor and Pete Alonso in the second inning, and then they got a home run from Cedric Mullins in the fourth. And so right there, that's 8 runs for the Mets on 10 hits, and you had the piggyback that, again, worked to perfection. Clay Holmes was great in this outing. Now, yes, he gave up some solo home runs, but guys are okay giving up solo homers because when there's nobody on base, they're going to attack, especially when they have a big lead like Clay Holmes did. So, yeah, he gives up a home run to one of the hottest hitters on the planet right now, Jackson Merrill, and then he gives up a home run to Jake Cronenworth. But other than that, he was really good in this start, got through 4 innings. The pitch count, let me pull that up real quick. The pitch count had to be next to nothing. I mean, he was just going after guys. You had Holmes at 53 pitches to get through 4 innings, gave up 3 hits, 2 home runs and 1 other hit, walked 1, struck out 2. So solid outing for Holmes. And then Sean Manaea comes in because, as Carlos Mendoza explained after the game, he was looking at the matchups, trying to find the perfect spot to drop Sean Manaea into this game. And that's why you saw him warming up in that 4th inning. We learned after that had Clay Holmes not gotten Jackson Merrill out, which he did. He struck him out to finish that 4th inning after giving up a double to Ramon Laureano. He gave Holmes a chance to get out of that inning and get through 4 to give Sean Manaea a clean inning. But if he didn't get Merrill out, Mendoza said he was going to go to Manaea because coming up next, you had Ryan O'Hearn, Jake Cronenworth, and Freddie Fermin. So, well, Freddie Fermin's a righty, but you had O'Hearn and you had Cronenworth, a couple of lefties. So that was a spot that he was looking at and said, all right, this is where I want to drop Manaea into this game. And Manaea came out firing. He looked outstanding. 1-2-3 first inning, picks up a strikeout the next inning. He gives up a 2-out single to Manny Machado, but that's it. He was attacking guys. He was locating his fastball. At one point, he broke 2 consecutive bats to, I think it was in the 7th inning. Yes, Jackson Merrill and Ryan O'Hearn created some firewood. Also struck out Ramon Laureano in that inning. 8th inning, he gave up a solo homer to Freddie Fermin, but that was it. That was all Manaea really gave up. Got through that 8th inning without giving up another run. Came out for the 9th inning, picked up a couple more strikeouts. Did give up a double to Jackson Merrill, and there was a pitch there that I thought he should have struck Merrill out on. The 4th pitch of that at bat, I thought that it touched and got that outside corner, but he didn't get the call, and then he gives up a double, but he was able to get Ryan O'Hearn out to finish off the game, and you saved the bullpen. So a really just well-played game by the New York Mets, and now all of a sudden you got momentum. And who knows where that momentum could take the Mets, but if they can have a really good finish to this homestand, if they can at least win this series against the Padres, and if they can sweep the Nationals over the weekend, again, they're going to go into the final week of the season in a great spot. So what I want to talk about next is give you a wild card update and also talk about some takeaways from this game that should bring some hope moving forward that maybe this team really can go on that run and get hot over these final 2 weeks and carry that momentum into a potential wild card series. So we're going to go through all of that in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, it's easy. It's honestly my favorite way to follow along with football because you have so many different ways that you can play. And what I also like is the fact that you can play football and baseball at the same time. You can combine different sports in the same lineup. And the best part, even if one of your picks misses, Prize Picks invented the flex play so you can still double your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. I would love to get there by the end of the season, so I really do appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. And also, make sure you check out our Locked On Mets postcast. If you're looking for an instant reaction after the game, Chris Schubert does a great job going live as soon as the final out is made. So check out our Locked On Mets postcast on the channel after each Mets game. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your wild card update here. Let's go through what happened on Tuesday and where things stand for the Mets. The Reds lost to the Cardinals. They got shut out, lost 3-0. The Diamondbacks, who are playing the Giants, walked them off 6-5. So all of a sudden, you got the Reds and the Giants, who are now both 3 games back, and the team you're looking at for the Mets magic number is the Diamondbacks, who are still just 1.5 games back. But going into this week, I said Mets fans should probably be rooting for the Diamondbacks in this series against the Giants. While the Mets have the tiebreaker over the Giants, I think the Giants' schedule from here on out is easier than the Diamondbacks. Yes, the Giants are going to have to go into Dodger Stadium and play 4 games. That's not easy. But next week, if they're able to survive this week and hang close, they're going to host the Cardinals, and then they are going to host the Rockies to close out the season. You don't want to see the Giants still being mathematically in it when they have 3 games against the worst team in baseball to close out the year. So having them lose some games this week, I think, is a good thing, especially because the Diamondbacks are going to face probably the hottest team in baseball right now, which is the Phillies, who beat the Dodgers again on Tuesday. They now have a magic number for a first-round bye of just 4 because they took the season series from the Dodgers by winning that game. The Dodgers are the team that's chasing them for that first round bye. And so they pick up a game, or they drop a game on the magic number for winning. They drop one for the Dodgers losing, and they also get another one taken off because they grabbed the tiebreaker. So the Phillies are in the driver's seat to lock up a first round bye, but I think they're going to want to push to have the best record in the National League. Certainly this weekend, they'll be pushing to continue to win games. And so that's going to be a tough series for the Diamondbacks to win. Then they're going to face off against the Dodgers, and then they close the season against the Padres. Now, there is a chance the Padres have nothing to play for once we get to that point, but still, because the Dodgers keep losing, they're only 2 games back in this division in the NL West. So there's every chance the Padres are still pushing, and also the Mets, who knows if they can end up sweeping the Padres in this series, which is still asking a lot. You're going up against Nick Pivetta today, but just follow me down the hypothetical highway on this one. There's a chance that they could be, trying to get out of a matchup against the Dodgers in the wild card if the Mets have gained some ground and the Padres do a lot of losing over the next week and change. So a lot is still up for grabs, but I just look at the Diamondbacks, who have such a tough schedule from here on out. And I think, especially with the state of their bullpen right now, it's going to be really tough for them to consistently win against these really good teams. So I thought that it was in the Mets' best interest for the Diamondbacks to win this series against the Giants, and they've already done that. Now, I think today you probably want the Giants to win because the Giants now are sitting at 75 wins with 11 games left to play. The best they could possibly do is get to 86 wins. The Mets are 8 games away from that, and they have the tiebreaker. So the Mets' magic number over the Giants is currently 8. The Reds have the tiebreaker. They're at the same record as the Giants. So the Mets' magic number to get past the Reds is 9. The Diamondbacks can still get to 87 wins, and they will likely have the tiebreaker, not based on the season head-to-head, but based on interdivision records. So whoever played better against their division, the Diamondbacks have a winning record against the NL West. The Mets will still see what happens when it comes to their final 2 series, one against the Nationals, one against the Marlins, but they're sitting at 500, so a good chance the D-backs would potentially have the tiebreaker. So at this point, I think you want to see the Giants win today, but the Mets' magic number currently to make the playoffs is 10 because they would have to win one more game than the Diamondbacks. So if the Diamondbacks won out, they would get to 87 wins. The Mets would have to get to 88. Obviously, with every Mets win and Diamondbacks loss, your magic number could drop by 2 each day. So if the Giants are able to win the final game of the series and the Mets can beat the Padres, they'll be sitting with a magic number of 8. And we'll see where it goes from there. But I really think right now, all you have to focus on is the Mets. if the Mets can finish off this week that I've been talking about, if they can have a 5-1 week here at home, they're going to be in a really good place. Okay. That right there would put their magic number, even if the Diamondbacks just go on a roll, that would put their magic number at 6 going into the final week. And again, I don't think the Diamondbacks are going to beat up on the Phillies. So let's just say the Phillies take that series and the Mets, again, have a 5-1 week. You're looking at your magic number being within 5 when you get into that final week of the season. So all the Mets have to focus on is winning their games. But I think what's happening behind them in the wild card race is exactly what you want to see, especially the Reds losing, because the Reds have a fairly easier, I don't want to say easy schedule, but I think it's still easier than the other teams. They're in St. Louis right now. They get to come home after this. They are going to play 4 games against the Cubs, which is a good thing for the Mets because the Cubs can hopefully beat them up a little bit. But then they're going to host the Pirates. And their final series of the season is in Milwaukee, where the Brewers might have nothing left to play for. So it's good to see the Reds losing. You definitely want to see that continue. But if the Mets can keep on winning, that really is all that matters. Now, when it comes to the takeaways from this game and how the Mets can build momentum off of it, the biggest one was just the way Sean Manaea pitched. I mean, to see him locating and attacking like that, it was refreshing. And personally, I don't know if I would change up the order. There's been some talk maybe for the next timeout based on matchups with maybe some more lefties atop the Nationals lineup. Maybe you would start Sean Manaea and go to Clay Holmes later in the game. Definitely an option. Personally, I kind of like the idea of Clay Holmes being this pseudo opener for Sean Manaea because Clay Holmes is experienced in pitching in leverage situations. And while the first inning is not necessarily a leverage inning, there's a reason why the opener strategy has been used around baseball in the past to help guys get into their bulk relief appearances or their starts after the opener, because that first inning can be tough. You're going up against the top of a lineup. So I like the idea of Clay Holmes coming out in a playoff game even and seeing a lineup the first time through. And then you go to Manaea, but it's all about matchups. And the bottom line is if Sean Manaea can get back to being the guy that we saw last year, it is a huge development for this team. But I like that we saw how well he pitched to the pen. I would just keep that up for now, because if Manaea ends up being this guy that can give you 5 innings of relief, I mean, imagine what that can do in a playoff game. Imagine if he's waiting on hand and you decide to give a playoff start to Brandon Sproat, and Brandon Sproat runs into trouble in the 3rd inning of a game, and let's just say you drop in maybe Ryan Stanek is playoff Stanek, and you drop Stanek in to get you out of a jam in the 3rd, and then you can hand the ball to Manaea in the 4th inning, and maybe Manaea can take you all the way up until handing the ball to Edwin Diaz. So having Manaea, and maybe it even makes sense to argue against myself, maybe it makes sense to have Holmes pitch on the back end of a piggyback before the end of the season too, just so that he can get back to that rhythm of coming into a game as a reliever instead of a starter, even though he's got so much experience doing it, but just to get him back into that muscle memory, because he might have to do that in the playoffs. But I think what you saw in this game is how the Mets could get around that perceived lack of starting pitching in October if those guys can settle into being really great for 4 innings. I'll take that from those guys moving forward. Now, if Manaea can actually ascend to the point where you can hand the ball in a playoff game and he can go 6 scoreless, that's outstanding, but it doesn't even have to be that. So a really big step forward for Manaea in this outing, and just a really encouraging, experiment with the piggyback of Holmes and Manaea. And the good news is you'll get to see it again on Sunday against the Nationals, which could be a great strategy to get through that game. You saved the bullpen today, so that helps you throughout the rest of this series. And again, moving forward, you can see that piggyback one more time this season. We talked about it on yesterday's show, or maybe it was the show I did 2 days ago. But when you look at the final 12 games, 6 of them are going to be started by the piggyback of Holmes and Manaea. 3 of them were going to be started by the piggyback of Holmes and Manaea. The other 3 was David Peterson. So, those veterans still covering half of these games with less starts going to the kids. it was something that could have been concerning based on how these guys have pitched. But now that you got one game under their belt and it's a big win, we'll see what happens from here. If David Peterson pitches a gem tonight, all of a sudden you're feeling much better about this rotation moving forward. And then you got Jonah Tong going in the final game of the series. So we'll see what Peterson does. We'll see how the Mets lineup can do against Nick Pivetta tonight. But I think they have some momentum, and hopefully they can hold on to it. If they're able to win this game, and then you got Jonah Tong going in a day game against Randy Vasquez, who knows? You might be able to pull off a sweep of the Padres even. But getting the series win tonight would just continue to build that momentum. And even if Tong drops the ball on Thursday, you got the Nationals coming to town, and you got Sproat, McLean, and then this Holmes, Manaea piggyback to close out your week. So you feel pretty good about the Mets' chances to hopefully beat up on Washington. Another thing that I think you can take from this game, this might be the Mets starting lineup moving forward that you actually use in the playoffs. Brett Baty at third base. He is such an upgrade over Mark Vientos defensively. And I think Mark's actually been playing a better third base lately. But you know Baty's going to give you the best possible defense that you can have in the infield. When you got Baty, Lindor, McNeil, that's pretty much as good as you can get other than throwing Acuna at second base. But the drop-off offensively, obviously not worth that. So this is the best infield the Mets can have. With Alonso at first, obviously, McNeil at second instead of Baty there, even though Baty's been good over there. Baty's a better third baseman than a second baseman. Lindor, Baty, that's the way you want your infield lined up. And if Cedric Mullins can find it over the final couple weeks, he's still a guy that started in the big leagues for a very long time compared to Tyrone Taylor, who's been a fourth outfielder for a majority of his career, compared to Jose Siri, who I just would not trust to start games down the stretch. And Jeff McNeil in center field was a break glass in case of emergency situation that has worked well enough that the Mets can always go to it. But you know your team is not at its best when McNeil's playing out of position and you got Vientos defensively at third. So when you can DH Vientos, have Baty at third, have McNeil at his best position at second, and then you got a center fielder in Cedric Mullins, who I don't think is great, but I don't think he is brutal out there by any stretch. If he can just continue to control his at-bats, which he has been doing, as I pointed out on whatever show it was earlier this week, I talked about how Mullins was still getting on base at a similar clip to Starling Marte, just with no impact with the bat. Now we saw him hit a home run. So maybe that gives him some confidence. Remember, Mullins was red hot prior to getting traded. In July, he had a great month. In April, he had a great month. Maybe he could have a great month coming up. And as David Stearns talked about to the media today, there's still chapters left to be written when it comes to the Mets trade deadline. He told the media, look, if you go back in retrospect with all the hindsight, sure, maybe they would have done some things differently. But he said they liked their thought process at the time, and I've echoed that sentiment on this show. I've talked about how you can't really knock the Mets for this deadline because who would have thought that Ryan Helsley would be this level of a disaster? You could have poked some holes in the Cedric Mullins trade for sure, just because even at the time, I didn't know if he was the center fielder the Mets should have gone after, but they gave up to get Cedric Mullins. I have to go back to this. They gave up two undrafted relievers and a guy that does throw very hard. And what was his name again? Is it Ramon Gomez? Don't quote me on that. But he was the guy that threw 104 miles per hour at Port St. Lucie this year. At the same time, they signed him for $10,000. So you gave up guys that you acquired for basically nothing, and you got a rental starting center fielder. Now, Mullins has not played well, but this is a game of momentum. And if Mullins can maybe use this game as a springboard, and he's got a couple more righties that he's going to start against, I'm sure, against the Padres here, you never know. And then maybe they'll actually give him a start against a lefty over the weekend if he gets hot. But getting Mullins to at least have some confidence and maybe not play so tight, that could open up a really long lineup for this Mets team. And it definitely does give you the best possible defense without sacrificing too much offense. The other thing you can do, of course, is if Tyrone Taylor gets healthy, you can always just go back to TT in center and have Mullins on the bench. I still think that is a good way to go about it. I just don't think that Jose Siri should be starting games. So I'm glad that Mullins was able to have a good game. And again, if it keeps Vientos at DH, that is a net positive for this team. Now, the one downside from this game is Francisco Alvarez cannot catch a break. The guy's playing hurt. He's got a torn ligament in his thumb. He's got a broken pinky. Both hands are messed up. And then he gets drilled by a 100-mile-per-hour fastball right on the elbow. Or I guess they said maybe it caught him a little bit above that elbow, the tricep area. Regardless, they think that he missed, any area that they'd be concerned with. They're not going to give him an MRI, but I imagine that thing's going to swell up like crazy. And so I don't think we see Francisco Alvarez start on Wednesday. Going into the series, I predicted that Alvarez would get his one off day of the week on Thursday, the day game after the night game. You let Hayden Sanger catch Jonah Tong, but I think at this point you go Sanger tonight, give Alvy a rest, and if the swelling comes down enough, maybe he goes on Thursday. If not, maybe you see him just start the whole series against the Nationals. But it doesn't seem like he's going to be anything more than day-to-day. Also, you have Luis Torrens on the mend. He played his first rehab game in Syracuse, played 7 innings, went 0 for 4 with a couple of strikeouts, but good to see him back in a game healthy. He has already had enough time in Syracuse to come back whenever he's ready to go. So I'm sure we'll see Torrens in short order, maybe over the weekend against the Nationals. If not, if they really want to give him a bunch of time to play in Syracuse and get his legs under him, maybe we see him join the Mets for that final road trip of the season, but no later than that. So good news on that front as well. Bottom line, the Mets had a huge game to keep this confidence up. And like David Stern said, the chapters have not been fully written. You never know. Ryan Helsley could all of a sudden have a great couple of appearances and be counted on in the playoffs and actually deliver. So don't count out this team just yet. If they get in, they still got as good of a chance as anybody to make a run, assuming they don't back their way in. If they can win their way in, if they can do it themselves, if they can, have that 5-1 week at home and then go on the road and beat the Cubs in a series and clinch that way, then I really do think that they can carry some momentum and be a team that is a little bit feared in October. With the lineup that they have 1-9 and with Nolan McLean and some of the other options that they could throw out there, you really don't know what the finished product is going to look like once the tournament starts. And that's exciting for Mets fans. The final segment, we're going to talk about the minor league playoffs as the Mets won a championship with one of their affiliates. So we're going to go through all of that to close out the show in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have that full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. I linked all my accounts to Monarch, and immediately I started to see some subscriptions that I was paying for that I was not using. And you start to see how much money you're spending on things like takeout and realize maybe I should be cooking at home a little bit more to save some of that money. Don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code LOCKEDONMLB. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. This is the final homestand of the season. You only have 5 more chances to catch the New York Mets play at Citi Field for this regular season. You don't want to miss it. And if you don't have tickets, don't worry. That's where Game Time comes in. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. You can get incredible deals on last-minute tickets with clear seat views and a lowest price guarantee, so you don't have to worry about buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game like Mets versus Padres the next couple days here, and you can take all of that guesswork out of buying your tickets when you use Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. If you're an everydayer that always tunes into the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me. Anytime news breaks from the Mets, you can ask me questions anytime. Take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. And get a live graphic sent to your phone each day so you know what's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now let's run through the minor league playoffs as the Mets continue to have some affiliates that are playing in postseason action here. And the Brooklyn Cyclones have officially won the South Atlantic League Championship. They swept their championship series, which began on Sunday in Game 1. The Cyclones scored 13 runs. Marco Vargas went 5 for 5 from the leadoff spot. Vargas, a slick fielding middle infielder the Mets got in the David Robertson trade a couple years ago, had a pretty solid season, but a big-time playoffs, and that was a huge game from him from the leadoff spot. You had Jonathan Henriquez, who spent all year in St. Lucie, came up for 7 games in Brooklyn, 20-year-old center fielder. He went 4 for 6 with 2 home runs and 6 RBIs in this game. Henriquez, definitely a name to watch next year when it comes to some of the Mets' top prospects, a guy that could be a fast riser. Now that he'll probably play a full season in Brooklyn, you never know where he can end up. Noah Hall pitched that first game, went 4 1/3, allowed just 1 run. The bullpen covered the final 4 2/3 without giving up a run, and they were able to win that game in very convincing fashion, 13-1. Tonight, a much different game. They won 2-1. It was lefty Franklin Gomez that pitched. He went 4 scoreless at the start of the game, struck out 5. The bullpen covered the final 5 innings and allowed just 1 run. And you had the Cyclones score in the 3rd inning. John Bay was not much of a prospect, but he had a leadoff triple. Then you had Marco Vargas get an RBI single. Like I said, a big playoff run for Vargas. Matt Ruddick, who's been in their system for a while, 27-year-old outfielder, again, not much of a prospect, but he had the other RBI single, scoring Vargas, and that ended up being the winning run. For the Cyclones, they finished with their best record in franchise history. Remember, this used to be a short season ball team. I guess that changed in what? It would have been after the realignment, I believe, in 2020. So 2021 has been full season ball since then, if not a little bit before that. I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure that's when they became a full season team. Regardless, best record still in franchise history, best record in minor league baseball in the first half. Remember, in the first half, it was a completely different team. It's just a lot of those guys got promoted. Carson Bench started off the year in Brooklyn. Chris Suero started off the year there. Jacob Reimer, a lot of the guys that are playing in the Double-A playoffs. Well, Bench made it up to triple, but you had, a lot of guys who started off the year in Brooklyn, and that's why they got off to that great open to their year. That's why they were able to make the playoffs from their performance in the first half of the season. But they went 4-0 in the playoffs, and you got to appreciate winning baseball. That is something you want to see. While minor league championships ultimately mean nothing, it's about teaching winning habits. And that's what the Mets have done. All of their affiliates made the playoffs outside of the Syracuse Mets, who theoretically can get in, but that's not really that much of a reflection of your farm system. The Syracuse Mets are comprised of a lot of guys who are, the extended roster for the big league club, guys that are shuttling back and forth. It's very hard to have a consistent pitching staff when you have so many guys that are up and down. So you don't really look at Syracuse and say, oh, that team winning is indicative of the state of the farm system. But when you see low A, high A, and double A all make the playoffs, that is impressive. And so the Cyclones, got a championship. St. Lucie, they were eliminated. Now Binghamton is going to make their run at it, and they were able to, for one, finish their regular season strong. They won the final 2 games that they played to move to 90-46 on the season. So to get to 90 wins in a 136-game season, I mean, that's insane. I wonder what the winning percentage is on that. Hold on real quick. Let me run the math. 90 divided by 136. Yeah, I mean, that's a 662 winning percentage. You multiply that over 162, 107 win pace over a 162 game season. So that just shows you how good Binghamton was this year. Obviously you had Jonah Tong headline that rotation for a long time, but Jack Wenninger had been there all year. I'm sure he might get one of these playoff starts coming up. Jonathan Santucci, who opened the year in Brooklyn, he got the ball for game 1 in the playoffs. went 4 2/3, allowed 5 hits, 2 walks, struck out 3, gave up just 1 run. That run came in the first inning. The Rumble Ponies evened it up in the 4th. Nick Morabito hit a leadoff double, advanced to 3rd, but was then thrown out the plate trying to score on a ground out. DeAndre Smith, I believe, was the one who stayed on. He was the one that hit that ground out that resulted in the force out at home. And then you had Chris Suero get a base hit, and JT Schwartz got a base hit to drive in Smith. Rumble Ponies scored another run in the 5th inning on a couple of walks, a sac fly that advanced the run to 3rd, and a wild pitch. And then in the 8th inning, Chris Suero hit a home run. So a big game for Suero, who, again, started the year in Brooklyn, ended up in Double-A, a really athletic catcher that can still go out there and play some outfield, steal bases, had some pop. Definitely an interesting prospect the Mets have right now, and good to see him coming through in a big game. You had Ben Simon, who pitched 2 1/3 innings of perfect relief after the start by Santucci. That got you through 7. Carlos Guzman pitched a scoreless 8th. And then in the 9th, Ryan Lambert was able to close it out for the save. Lambert, definitely a name to watch. He is one of the top relief prospects the Mets have. I would say if you look at their farm system, it had to pick 2 arms that had closer potential out of their minor league relief prospects. It's Dylan Ross in AAA, and it's Ryan Lambert in AA. Lambert has the big fastball, and that is what's going to obviously catch eyes. But this season, he's been great at run prevention overall. You look at a 1.62 ERA, and since he got up to AA and he ended up pitching 42 innings for the Rumble Ponies, a 1.71 ERA with 64 strikeouts in those 42 innings pitched. And now he's getting a save in a playoff game. So the Rumble Ponies are now 1 win away from advancing to the championship series, which would begin on the 21st, which is Sunday. And that would be another 3-game series against the winner of the AA Western League. And that'll end up deciding who is the champion of the AA this year. So the Mets have a chance, or the Rumble Ponies have a chance to get that done. And that would be pretty impressive if your 2 affiliates where most of your top prospects have been through this season, high A and AA, each won championships. And it's a distinct possibility at this point. So I'll be excited to see who they decide to throw in that second game and if they can pick up a victory. I think they have a day off, and then they play the final 2 in Binghamton, if I'm not mistaken. So let me check that real quick to confirm that I'm giving you the proper information there, because if you have MLB.TV, you can watch these playoff games right on the app or on your desktop. So you can definitely catch them. And yes, it is going to be Thursday, 6:07 p.m. You'll see game 2 of that series. And then the final game, if necessary, would be on Friday, again, off day on Saturday. And then they would open up the championship series on the 21st. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But the Rumble Ponies are playing some good baseball. It'd be cool to see them finish off what's been an unbelievable year for them. Anyway, that is going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. Really appreciate all of you for tuning in. On tomorrow's show, we'll be breaking down whatever happened between the Mets and the Padres, and obviously looking at the rest of this wild card race, with, after that game, only 10 games left in this season. Coming down the wire, it's going to be fun to cover it all for you here on the show. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Make sure, if you want to be one of our Locked On Mets insiders, you'll find a link in the episode description, or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports Today. With our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.